Not everyone deserves access to your personal journey. There is power in what you keep to yourself, and silence often becomes the strongest form of strength. When you hold parts of your story close, you protect the essence of who you are. You guard the fragile moments of becoming before they have the chance to mature into something unshakable. Privacy is not secrecy, it's stewardship. It's the act of protecting something sacred until it is ready to stand on its own. Every time you share a part of your story, you hand someone a piece of your energy. Some people will treat it with care, while others might not understand its value. The world is filled with opinions, judgments, and projections, and when your story is still forming, it can easily be bent under the weight of other people's expectations. Protecting your story isn't about building walls, it's about choosing the right audience for the right moment. Your journey is deeply personal, and the emotions, doubts, and triumphs that come with it belong to you first. When you constantly share your progress, you risk losing the intimacy of your own growth. The process of self-discovery is meant to be experienced, not performed. It's in the quiet spaces, those moments when no one is watching, that you truly hear your own voice. That inner voice doesn't need validation, it needs clarity. Privacy gives you the room to think clearly without the noise of opinions. It allows your ideas to breathe before they are exposed to the world. When you speak too soon, you invite feedback that might confuse your direction. But when you stay silent long enough to understand your own reasoning, your vision becomes harder to shape. You begin to make decisions from conviction instead of reaction. That's how power builds. It starts with self-trust. When you keep parts of your story private, you give yourself permission to evolve without the pressure of an audience. People are quick to form conclusions, and once they do, it becomes harder for you to outgrow the version of yourself they see. But when you hold back, you give yourself the freedom to change, to shift direction, to fail quietly, and to rebuild without anyone's commentary. Growth that happens in private is growth that lasts. There is also a quiet confidence that comes from not needing to explain yourself. When you no longer seek validation through storytelling, you begin to walk with a steadier presence. You know who you are, and that knowledge doesn't require an audience. You start to realize that silence isn't emptiness, it's control. It's the awareness that your journey doesn't need to be witnessed to be meaningful. Every story has a timing. The most powerful stories are the ones told from a place of understanding, not from the middle of confusion. When you speak too soon, you share a draft that isn't finished. But when you wait, when you allow life to shape the lesson fully, your story gains depth and purpose. People can feel that difference. They can sense when your words come from reflection instead of reaction. Holding your story doesn't mean you're hiding. It means you respect the process of your own becoming. The moments of pain, progress, and learning are not for public consumption until you've made peace with them. And once you have, your story becomes more than just a recount. It becomes a message that carries strength and wisdom. There's a sacred kind of power that comes from knowing more than you reveal. It's the power of presence without explanation, of confidence without performance. The world might be loud, but you don't have to be. You can let your results do the talking, your growth do the proving, and your character do the teaching. The less you tell everyone, the more you understand yourself. The more you understand yourself, the less you need to be understood. Privacy, then, isn't about shutting the world out. It's about creating space to grow roots before you bloom. And when you finally do, the world won't need the backstory. They'll see the strength that was built in silence. Growth is not always loud, visible, or celebrated. Most of the time, it happens quietly, beneath the surface, where no one can see. The moments that truly shape who we are don't happen on a stage or in front of an audience. They happen in solitude, in the late hours of reflection, in the private battles that no one else knows about. It's in those quiet places that character is built, discipline is formed, and resilience takes root. Growth doesn't need applause, it needs patience. There is a common belief that progress must be visible to be real, that if people can't see it, it doesn't exist. But real transformation doesn't demand recognition. Think of a seed planted deep in the soil. For weeks, sometimes months, there's no visible change. The surface looks the same, still uneventful, silent. Yet underneath, something powerful is happening. Roots are spreading, strengthening, and preparing for what's next. Without that unseen work, the plant would never survive once it breaks through the surface. Human growth works the same way. The most meaningful changes often occur when no one is watching. You learn to confront your fears, to make hard choices, to stay consistent even when no one notices. You learn to keep going without the validation of others. That's where endurance is born, in the quiet, invisible moments of persistence. When you grow in silence, you are not just improving a skill or habit, you are developing the foundation of your inner strength. Silence is not emptiness, it's space. It's the room you need to think, to process, to heal. When the noise of the world fades, you can finally hear your own thoughts. You start to understand your motives, your values, and your vision without the distortion of outside opinions. It's in the stillness that you reconnect with yourself, that you remember why you started in the first place. The world moves fast, but personal growth asks for stillness. Every person who has ever achieved something meaningful has endured a season of quiet effort. Those periods often feel lonely because no one claps for the work that's unseen. But that's exactly where the magic happens. The habits you build when no one is watching become the foundation of who you are when the world finally sees you. Growth in silence is not glamorous, but it is honest. It strips away performance and forces you to face yourself fully. When you're growing quietly, you also learn to separate real progress from performative progress. You stop doing things to be noticed and start doing them to be better. You stop chasing approval and start chasing mastery. You learn that silence doesn't mean stagnation. It means direction. It's a form of commitment that doesn't need witnesses. You're not proving your growth. You're living it. In silence, you gain something that noise can't give you: clarity. You begin to see where you are, where you're heading, and what you truly want. You realize that growth is not about how fast you move, but how deeply you understand. The pace of your progress doesn't matter as much as the purpose behind it. Silence gives you time to refine that purpose, to make sure you're climbing the right mountain before you reach the top. When you resist the urge to announce every step of your journey, you create space for authenticity. You are no longer performing progress, you are embodying it. The absence of external validation pushes you to rely on your own sense of worth. You begin to recognize that the most meaningful victories are often private. The world may not see the nights you stayed up learning, healing, or trying again, but those nights define who you are becoming. The beauty of quiet growth is that it protects your momentum. The fewer distractions you have, the stronger your focus becomes. The less attention you seek, the more energy you can pour into your craft, your purpose, your becoming. Every quiet step builds confidence that can't be shaken by outside noise. Growth becomes less about being seen and more about becoming solid. There is strength in stillness, and there is progress in patience. When you let your growth happen in silence, you honor the process instead of rushing it. You give yourself time to grow at your own pace, in your own way, without interference. The roots you build in that silence will sustain you when the world finally sees your bloom, and you'll know that everything beautiful about your growth began in a quiet place. When we share our dreams and struggles too early, we open the door for doubt to enter before our vision has found its strength. The moment an idea is born, it's fragile, still forming, still finding shape and purpose. It needs protection, not exposure. Every thought, every dream, and every goal starts small, and when we reveal them prematurely, we risk letting the noise of others weaken what hasn't yet matured. Sometimes silence isn't secrecy, it's strategy. People don't always mean harm when they question your dreams, but not everyone has the capacity to see what you see. When you tell them your plans, they process them through their own fears, limitations, and experiences. They don't see your vision, they see your risks. And when they speak, their doubt can sound like reason. Their hesitation can sound like wisdom. If you're not grounded enough, you might start to believe them. That's how dreams fade. Not because they weren't possible, but because they weren't protected. Your vision doesn't need validation, it needs commitment. The earlier you seek approval, the more control you give away. Once you allow too many voices into your creative space, it becomes harder to hear your own. It's like planting a seed and letting everyone else step into the soil before it's had the chance to root. You cannot nurture something delicate in a crowded space. Growth, in its earliest stages, requires isolation. There's a powerful clarity that comes when you keep your dreams close. You start to test them in your own mind. Shape them with your own reasoning and refine them through your own discipline. You're not building for applause, you're building for alignment. When you don't rush to share, you give your dream the chance to breathe, to grow quietly into something undeniable. And when it's ready, it will no longer need defense. Its strength will speak for itself. When you share too soon, you invite opinions that are often louder than your intuition. Some people might discourage you out of fear, while others might encourage you with pressure that you're not ready for. Both can be dangerous. Encouragement and doubt, when given prematurely, can distort your sense of timing. You might either move too fast or stop too soon. Protecting your vision gives you balance. It helps you move when you're ready, not when others think you should. The early stages of any dream are meant for learning, failing, and adjusting. When you're constantly sharing every step, you lose the freedom to experiment without judgment. You start to worry about what people will think if it doesn't work out. That fear becomes a quiet form of self-censorship, limiting your creativity and courage. But when you keep your process private, you give yourself permission to stumble, to explore, to evolve without an audience keeping score. There's also a subtle energy exchange that happens when you talk about your plans before acting on them. Every time you share your goals, your mind releases a bit of the satisfaction that should only come from completion. You start to feel accomplished just by saying it out loud, which can dull the drive to actually do it. Action loses its urgency when talk replaces effort. Protecting your dream from overexposure keeps the hunger alive. It keeps you moving forward. Not everyone can see what you're building, and that's okay. Visionaries are often misunderstood in the beginning because their ideas challenge what's comfortable. You don't owe anyone an explanation for what they can't comprehend. The people who truly support you won't need constant updates. They'll trust that you're working, even in silence. The rest don't need to be convinced. Your results will handle that later. When you resist the urge to tell everyone your plans, you begin to rely on something far more powerful, your own conviction. You learn to make decisions not for approval, but for progress. You discover that it's better to surprise the world with your results than to explain your intentions endlessly. A quiet plan doesn't mean an absent plan, it means a protected one, guarded from doubt until it's strong enough to stand. The discipline of keeping your dreams private is an act of respect for your own potential. It's the understanding that timing matters and that not every truth is meant to be told in its infancy. The world doesn't need to witness the planning, the practice, or the patience. It only needs to see the outcome. And when that moment comes, your vision will be unshakable. Not because it was never challenged, but because it was guarded long enough to grow roots. Authenticity has never been about explaining yourself. It has always been about becoming yourself. There is a quiet kind of confidence that comes when your actions align with your values and your words follow your deeds, not precede them. You don't need to tell people who you are when your behavior makes it clear. In a world obsessed with declarations and appearances, authenticity shines brightest through consistency. It's not about how often you say what you believe. It's about how faithfully you live it. We live in an age where everyone wants to be seen, where the measure of truth seems tied to visibility. But the essence of being real doesn't come from being visible. It comes from being rooted. When your actions are grounded in integrity, you stop needing to prove your worth through explanation. You begin to trust that the people who matter will recognize truth through observation, not persuasion. It's not the words that convince, it's the evidence of a life that reflects them. There is something powerful about people who move with quiet certainty. They don't need to justify their choices or explain their motives because their actions speak clearly. Their presence carries weight, not because they demand attention, but because they live with purpose. These are the individuals who influence not by argument, but by example. They remind us that words can be doubted, but consistency cannot. When you constantly feel the need to explain yourself, it's often a sign that you're not yet at peace with your own path. Seeking understanding from others becomes a substitute for self-assurance. But the more you grow, the less you chase that approval. You realize that authenticity isn't about convincing others. It's about honoring the truth within you, even if no one else recognizes it. The moment you stop needing to be understood, you start to embody freedom. Your authenticity is reflected not in what you say about yourself, but in how you respond when no one's watching. It's in how you treat people who can do nothing for you. It's in how you handle disappointment without bitterness and success without arrogance. Every quiet act of integrity becomes a declaration of who you are, louder than any speech could ever be. You stop talking about your character and start showing it. Living authentically means choosing alignment over appearance. It means doing the right thing even when it's unseen and staying true to your principles even when they're unpopular. When your actions reflect your inner values, you build a reputation that doesn't need defending. Over time, people come to trust what you represent because it's been proven through behavior, not broadcast through words. Authenticity isn't about storytelling, it's about truth telling through action. The beauty of living this way is that it gives you peace. When your life aligns with your beliefs, you no longer feel the pressure to perform. You stop worrying about how you're perceived because you know who you are. You move through the world with ease, not because everything is perfect, but because there's no longer a gap between your intentions and your actions. That harmony becomes your quiet strength. Authenticity also builds credibility, the kind that lasts. When people see that you follow through, that you keep your word, that you treat others with respect, even when it's inconvenient, they trust you. Trust can't be demanded. It's earned through repetition. Every consistent act of integrity builds it, one brick at a time. And when trust is established, you no longer need to speak as loudly. Your example carries the message for you. The most authentic individuals don't need attention to feel validated. They find fulfillment in the process of becoming, not in the reaction it gets. They know that authenticity isn't a brand or a performance. It's a discipline. It requires daily choice, even when no one acknowledges it. They are guided not by public recognition, but by internal conviction. Their power lies not in how much they say, but in how much they live by what they believe. When you stop explaining and start embodying, you shift from persuasion to inspiration. You begin to show others what's possible through the quiet strength of example. The world listens differently when your actions speak first. It begins to trust your voice because it recognizes the truth in your steps. That's what it means to live authentically, to let your consistency be your language and your integrity be your voice. Timing is one of the most overlooked elements of growth and success. We often feel a constant urge to share, to announce, to prove that we are progressing. But timing determines whether your story inspires or confuses, whether it empowers or exposes you. There is a rhythm to becoming, and when we try to rush it, we interrupt the process that gives our story depth. The moment you understand that not everything is meant to be revealed at once, you begin to move with intention instead of impulse. There is a season for silence, a time to build without broadcasting, to learn without validation, to prepare without recognition. These are the seasons that test your patience, that ask you to trust the unseen work happening beneath the surface. Growth doesn't always give immediate results. Sometimes you're being refined, shaped, and strengthened in ways that no one can see. In that stillness, you are not being overlooked, you are being prepared. Every great story needs time before it's told. When we share too early, we often interrupt our own development. We expose the unfinished parts of our journey to criticism that can distort our confidence. Every idea, every dream, every breakthrough begins as something fragile. Like fruit that ripens too soon, when a story is told before it's ready, it loses its sweetness. Timing gives your message maturity. It transforms experiences into lessons, emotions into wisdom, and struggles into strength. Without that transformation, your story remains half told. There's a difference between being ready to live your truth and being ready to share it. Living it means embodying it, feeling it, understanding it from within. Sharing it means translating it for others. The two require different levels of growth. If you share before you've fully lived it, your message may sound uncertain or defensive. But once you've absorbed the lesson completely, you no longer tell your story to explain. You tell it to empower. Patience allows you to see the bigger picture. It helps you recognize that each chapter of your life serves a purpose, even the ones that feel like pauses. Sometimes the delay is the development. The waiting season teaches you resilience, clarity, and discernment. It trains you to trust timing instead of forcing outcomes. When you finally do share your story, it carries a depth that only time could give. The pauses become proof that endurance has meaning. There's also wisdom in knowing what to withhold. Not everything needs to be said, And not every truth needs to be told right away. Some lessons are meant to simmer, to evolve, to settle in your heart before they're shared with others. When you give yourself time to fully understand what you've been through, your story becomes richer. It gains layers of insight that can only come from distance. Time doesn't just heal, it clarifies. The right timing transforms vulnerability into strength. When you speak from a wound that's still open, it's pain-seeking relief. But when you speak from a wound that's healed, it becomes a testimony. The difference lies in time. Time gives perspective. It allows you to see not just what happened, but what it taught you. It lets you transform emotion into meaning. And when you finally share, your story no longer comes from hurt, it comes from hope. The world values speed, but meaning requires patience. We are constantly encouraged to show progress, to share updates, to stay visible. Yet some of the most powerful transformations happen in private. Beyond the timeline, beyond the post, the people who make the greatest impact are often those who took their time. They didn't rush to speak, they waited until their words carried the weight of experience. They understood that timing isn't about delay, it's about readiness. There's a quiet power in moving in sync with your own season. You stop comparing your pace to others because you understand that growth isn't a race, it's a rhythm. Some lessons take longer to learn, some dreams take longer to build, and that's okay. When you honor timing, you honor process. You allow yourself to bloom when the conditions are right, not when the world demands it. You learn to trust that your story will unfold exactly when it should. The beauty of perfect timing is that it never feels forced. When you finally share your story, it feels natural, like it was waiting for that exact moment to be heard. The message carries truth without effort, strength without strain. You no longer rush to prove, you simply reveal. Timing gives your story authenticity, and authenticity gives it power. In waiting, you don't lose momentum, you gain meaning, and meaning is what makes your story unforgettable. Seeking validation is one of the easiest traps to fall into when you're on a journey of growth. The human heart naturally craves acknowledgement. We want to know that what we're doing matters, that someone sees our effort, that we are moving in the right direction. But validation can quietly turn into dependency. The more you seek it, the more you need it, and before long, your motivation becomes tied to approval rather than purpose. The danger isn't in being appreciated, it's in needing to be. When you focus too much on external validation, you start to measure your worth through other people's reactions. You begin to edit your dreams to fit their expectations. You start to choose paths that feel acceptable instead of paths that feel right. Growth that depends on approval will always be unstable because the world's opinion changes constantly. What's celebrated today may be questioned tomorrow. Building your confidence on that kind of shifting ground leaves you powerless. Real growth happens when you turn your attention inward. Instead of asking, "Do they think I'm doing well?" you start asking, "Am I becoming better than I was yesterday?" That simple shift changes everything. It frees you from comparison and competition. You stop performing progress and start experiencing it. You begin to understand that the only validation that matters is the one that comes from integrity. Knowing that you're staying true to your purpose, even when no one notices. Focusing on your growth means committing to the process rather than the praise. It's understanding that every step forward, no matter how small, is valuable. When you're not chasing approval, you can take risks, make mistakes, and learn without fear. You give yourself permission to evolve. True progress doesn't need witnesses, it just needs effort. Growth, when done privately, becomes pure because it's driven by internal purpose rather than external recognition. Validation is loud, but growth is quiet. Validation wants attention, but growth seeks depth. When you focus on growth, you stop needing to prove your worth through visible milestones. You realize that the most powerful changes often have no audience. No one sees the discipline it takes to stay committed, the patience it takes to wait for results, or the courage it takes to start again after failure. That invisible work is what shapes you into someone capable of lasting success. The moment you detach from validation, you also free yourself from fear. You stop hesitating to move because of what people might think. You stop explaining your choices to those who don't understand them. Fear loses its grip when your motivation isn't tied to approval. You begin to live with conviction, guided by clarity rather than consensus. You don't need to prove you're right. You just need to be real. Growth that comes from within becomes unshakable because it doesn't depend on anyone's permission. There's a profound peace that comes when you no longer need applause to feel accomplished. You can appreciate recognition without relying on it. You can be proud of your work even when it goes unnoticed. You start to see that validation is temporary, but growth is permanent. Recognition fades, but the lessons you learn remain. The work you put into yourself, your habits, mindset, and resilience stays with you long after the compliments stop. The pursuit of growth also teaches humility. When you're focused on improving yourself instead of impressing others, you become more patient with your process. You accept that progress is uneven, that there are days of momentum and days of stillness. You stop comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. You understand that everyone's journey is timed differently and that real fulfillment comes not from being ahead, but from becoming aligned with your own path. The irony is that when you stop seeking validation, people begin to notice you more. Authenticity naturally attracts attention because it's rare. When your actions are driven by purpose instead of approval, they carry a different kind of energy. Steady, confident, grounded. You don't have to announce your growth. It becomes visible through the way you move, speak, and live. People can sense when someone is growing for themselves rather than performing for others. Focusing on growth over validation is the art of choosing substance over appearance. It's understanding that applause feels good, but evolution feels better. The quiet work you do in private becomes the strength that sustains you in public. Every moment of unseen progress builds the foundation for something real. When you grow for yourself, not for validation, you create a life that doesn't depend on approval to feel meaningful. You create a life that simply is.